Joining me now, Steve Bannon. Steve was the campaign chairman for the Donald Trump for President campaign. He engineered the big upset victory. He was also 2 years in the White House as President Trump's lead strategic advisor, the chairman of Citizens for the American Republic, a C4, his new political action committee, of which he's chairman and executive director. And what you want to do is follow them on Twitter at CitizensAR, at CitizensAR. Joining us now, Steve Bannon. Steve, great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John.
Okay, Steve. Sound a little scratchy today. I hope you're getting over that cold you've got.
I just got back from the border. As you know, it's about 100. It was 107, I think, down in El Paso when we were there, and we also checked out other border opportunities to build for. We built the wall down in New Mexico and Arizona. So got a little bit of a cold going in and out between the air conditioning and the 102 and 105 degree heat, but it was well worth it. The wall, as we built in El Paso, is really a model for how for southern border security. So it was a great trip.
Now you've got a couple miles of wall. You want to build more, right, Steve?
Well, not just that. I mean, President Trump, they're fighting him every day. Federal court just stopped, I think, additional construction, I think, in Arizona, Texas, and California last night with 2019 funds. Not only does he had to fight the Republican establishment, the permanent political class, the progressive Democrats, the media, the courts, and he's trying to pound it out. I think they're actually building a wall right now in California. Our specialty is to build those areas where the Army Corps of Engineers on private land feels it's too tough. In outside of El Paso, Texas, in Sunland Park, New Mexico, we literally built straight up a hill where the San Cristo Rey Mountain, where the cartels had 19 paths they were bringing across human trafficking, sex trafficking, and drugs. And that's our principal thing is to try to stop the cartels down there. So much has changed about border security, and I think you've seen it the last couple of days. AOC has been down there. Clint, Texas, I think is right near that facility near El Paso. The Democrats have just taken, Cory Booker came out last night with his proposal. They're really taking a pretty radical, in fact, shockingly radical, open borders, proposition to the country to really essentially cripple customs and border, to virtually eliminate ICE, to make it easier to get really economic asylum in the United States, not political asylum. And if they continue to push to try to get economic asylum, it's just going to change everything about our asylum process. So I happen to think that this entire border situation is going to be one of the central dynamics, along with China, the two central dynamics in the 2020 campaign. I think you see AOC going to the border and making such a dramatic demonstration of what she felt were unsafe, unsanitary conditions. In addition, you had this Customs and Border Facebook page that now they're trying to go after Customs and Border agents. Their professor in England said today that they ought to start putting, and I think she wrote in the New York Times, they ought to start naming the individual names of Customs and Border agents in their hometowns, so they essentially can be harassed or be shamed. This dynamic on the border, I'm telling you, if people think, hey, we've been talking about the border for 20, 25 years, it was intense in 2013 with DACA, it was intense in the Trump campaign in 2016, I don't think folks understand that this is about to reach a whole new level of intensity, and really the sovereignty of the country, I think, is going to be at stake here.
So, Steve, a lot of people texting me, a lot of our base, very frustrated, saying, yeah, well, the bottom line is the president said he was going to build a wall. He said he was going to stop illegal immigration, and it's bigger and badder than ever since he's been there. He's done nothing. So I got a lot of complaints over the last couple of days of the Trump base, frustrated. How do you combat that, Steve?
Here's what I would say to the base. Look how tough it's been. I mean, it's been he's fought it. He's tried to get the border wall funding where he could get it. He's tried to push this through where he could get it. He hasn't gotten a lot of support. I also want to throw it back on the base. I mean, this is a time now, I think, for patriots to stand up and say, hey, look, we have to have not just the president's back. We have to start, joining organizations, going to Numbers USA, going to CIS and other information, get more information, start to hold your local congressmen, your local senators. The Republican establishment, remember, is controlled by the business interests. They don't want to see strict enforcement. They like that cheap labor. And I don't want to put it back on the base, but this is, if you want to have a secure border, if you want to have your sovereignty, If you want to have an asylum system that works for political asylum, as the United States has always been incredibly generous, it's upon us. I don't think we can get into a mode of starting to whine and point fingers. Trump has not been totally successful in everything, but he has tried and really put forward a massive effort in everything. But you see the forces that are aligned against this, and you're going to have to fight for it every day. One thing I just want to tell people, it's entering a whole new phase. If you look at the Democratic debates last week, when they're talking about financing medical care, essentially Medicaid for all, for illegal immigration, you can see how radical that is. These are people who do not put citizens first. And this is a road to complete bankruptcy if we go down this road. Mm-hmm. So the radical nature of the Democrats in this regard, just look what's come over the last couple of days. Look at what Cory Booker's saying. Look at what AOC. And what they're trying to do now at the southern border is trying to demonize Customs and Border agents. They're going to demonize the ICE agents. President Trump just came out, I think, this morning and said he's going to have another huge deportation effort with ICE. Remember, the last deportation effort 10 or 15 days ago was stopped because senior executives, I think, inside of DHS leaked it to the Washington Post it was about to happen. And that got, it got blown up. So, what I would tell the base, stop whining. Put your shoulder to the wheel. This is, once again, it's going to be the reason Donald Trump is president is because his base got back of him and really worked hard, got out the vote, and won this tremendous victory in 2016. We're now faced with other emergencies. And I think anybody that says there's not a crisis on the southern border has not been to the southern border and talked to the people on the southern border. What I'm proudest about the wall and what Brian Kolfage has done with the Build the Wall is that wall adds security for people in northern Mexico and people in Central America. Remember, this southern border right now is virtually controlled by the cartels. The cartels have turned it into a cash machine. They use that border as a way to generate high profits for themselves for transporting drugs, transporting humans, and particularly transporting women that could become sexual workers and it can be sexually abused in the United States. This has become a huge cash flow business for these people. They have terrorized northern Mexico. They're terrorizing the people up from Central America. What the wall does is force people to go through ports of entry where you have some control of the situation. So that's why there's no doubt, and you can see right now in a little bit of the wall, I think 2/3 of a mile that we built up the side of this mountain, it's already had a dramatic impact on stopping the cartels. So, people have to have President Trump's back. This bill the other day that just got passed, I think the $4.5 billion bill had very little about border security in it. Most of it is about housing. Most of it is about detention centers. Most of it is about asylum seekers and illegal aliens. And so, once again, I think people have to engage in this issue. People have been, I think, a little bit back on their heels. And if you just think I've said this so many times, if you think that winning one election in 2016 is going to wave a magic wand and you're going to get your country back and you're going to get everything that you thought you were going to get, you're just mistaken. This is a process. The Democrats understand that. That's why they turned out huge in 2018, and that's why they're looking to mobilize in a very large way in 2020. So for the base, hey, I would love to pat you on the head and say it's all going to be better. It's not. It's going to require your engagement every day, and that's what it's going to take to save your country.
WeBuildAWall.us. Steve, I know you guys had a kind of a telethon down there. One of the things you're trying to do is raise money so you can continue to build the wall. How is that going? How is the funding?
I think it's going great. I think we raised $1 million over there. We've raised $3 million. We've raised an additional over $3 million since we actually completed the first segment of this wall. We've now had here's the thing, and we'll show more of the wall as we go on the next couple of weeks. We're actually going to have more events down there that we'll announce. Brian Kolfage will announce on July 4th. But that wall is it's an in-depth security system. We have fiber optics underneath it, so you can't approach the wall on the other side unless you know about it. You can't burrow underneath the wall. It's super high security. We have a camera system and Klieg lights at night. We have easy access for the Border Patrol. We've actually put concrete down so they can bring the trucks and the cars up there, not just a dirt path. And this goes straight up a mountain where they used to use it as a way to get drugs and human trafficking into the United States. It's really a show place. And remember, people have to remember, we built this over a weekend. We built this entire wall. We graded it for 8 days because it's like Masada. You got to go up the side of a hill. But we built the wall in over a weekend, starting Memorial Day weekend on a Friday and finishing essentially on Tuesday morning, and much to the shock of some of the locals. But this wall is state-of-the-art. It is absolutely state-of-the-art, and we're showing people this is what can be done. This is just to augment what President Trump is doing. Remember, every day he's fighting in the courts, he's fighting in Congress. This is to augment his program. So we have to have the back of President Trump to try to push forward the overall building of the wall that we need. But there are also going to be aspects of this where the Army Corps of Engineers on private property just deem it's not doable. Those private property owners are now, I can't tell you how many people are coming to us now. They've actually seen a physical wall be built to say, you have to do this, you have to help me on my property. So this is a beginning phase. I also think what this wall does is start to galvanize this issue of what actual southern border security is. You know, a wall is a fact. These walls actually stop the cartels, and right now that's what's about on the southern border. You have to stop the cartels. The cartels are the institutions that are bringing the asylum seekers up from Central America. Now, the issue of the asylum seekers has to be solved in Central America. It has to be solved in conjunction with those governments, in conjunction with the corporations that are down there, to start to alleviate the disastrous economics of those countries. But the mechanism that gets them up is the cartels. So in President Trump, I'll tell you, the deal he cut with Mexico, you can already see a little more input into the southern border because you're seeing federales, you're seeing Mexican Marines that are deployed there that you didn't see before. President Trump, I think, announced yesterday he's waiving the tariffs right now as Mexico tries to enforce their immigration system even more. So, look, this is enormously complicated, but it gets very simple. We've got to build the wall.
So what you've done there with We Build the Wall is you've got the prototype, you've got the model, you're doing it on private property, you've navigated your way through the local zoning ordinances to get it done. And if people that are listening right now, if they want to contribute to that, Steve, they just do what? They go to webuildthewall.us.
Yeah, just go We Build the Wall. We got a GoFundMe page. We're going to have additional. Just go to our website, We Build the Wall. If you can donate, great. If you can't, just get more information. I mean, as much of this is to build awareness. Look, this southern border situation, just like in 2016, is going to be one of the defining issues of the 2020 campaign. You can see how the Democrats are now radicalizing this policy. Their policies are open border policies. There's just no doubt about it. I mean, you've seen what Cory Booker's coming out with. You see what AOC's come out with. You see what Kamala Harris is coming out with. And now they're taking a different tack. They're trying to break the back of Customs and Border. They're trying to break the back of ICE. And they're doing this. This professor saying, you got to out the CPB agents. You got to basically shame them in front of their local communities. You got to put their names in there. The people that are trying to run these detention centers have to be shamed. So they're going after the actual mechanisms for border enforcement. That's why I think President Trump's this upcoming ICE deportment evolution, we'll have to see how it goes. But remember, inside his own government, that leak to the Washington Post came from somebody that knew what was going on at DHS. And it actually put off that campaign that was supposed to start, I think, 2 weeks ago. So this thing on the border is getting radicalized. The Democrats are coming through with a radicalized program that one of the things on We Build the Wall is just to explain. We're not a political organization, but just to explain the facts of what's actually going on the southern border.
All right, so, Steve, were you shocked? We're with Steve Bannon, former campaign chairman, Donald Trump for president campaign, engineered the victory, 2 years, senior strategic advisor to the president in the White House. And I remember when I visited there early on, Reince Priebus, this chief of staff of this beautiful office with couches and TVs and a fireplace or something. Steve had this office. All I saw was a huge whiteboard in his office with all the promises the president made with check marks by them or question marks. And Build the Wall was on there, Steve, if you remember that. In fact, I wish I had that whiteboard. I could probably auction off.
I think we sent it to the Smithsonian when I left, or they put it in the White House basement. One or the other. I hadn't figured out what. But
it was a classic, though.
The whiteboard was very important, and Build the Wall was the number one thing on there.
It was the number one thing on it. I saw. No question. Were you shocked that the New York Times ran that op-ed about doxing federal employees?
I think it shows you the radical nature that the mainstream media is still the main opposition party to President Trump. Folks got to understand this is being radicalized. Look, the New York Times, it's bad enough about doxing the federal employees, particularly these are not senior federal employees. They're talking about, Customs and Borders agents, right? People making, $35,000-$40,000 a year. These are, they're talking about going after the average working people that really are. What they're trying to do is intimidate and drive out of ICE and Customs and Border so that people don't want to join it. That's what they're trying to do. But what's more shocking is the radical nature of what you heard in the Democratic debate. I mean, they're bidding up. I didn't hear anything about what they're going to do for American citizens. What I heard is that they're going to fully finance Medicaid for illegal aliens. Right? This is a radical. If you just look at the facts of where the Democratic Party has gone in the last couple of years, it's pretty shocking. And I think now that people have to start to put together the facts of what's the implications of that. And I think that's a major policy issue that President Trump is clearly going to get engaged in, and every day he's talking about it. But I think this is going to be one of the biggest highlights in going forward in 2020 is that the Democratic Party has been radicalized pretty significantly. I think about particularly this issue of the border. And you saw AOC's performance yesterday at the border where she said people are drinking out of toilets or drinking toilet water, which is in fact not the case at all. But it's that kind of dramatic presentation that is trying to galvanize. Look, this 2020 election is going to be about mobilization, just like in 2018. Don't look at 16 as the predicate. 18 is the predicate for the 20 election. It is about mobilization and not about persuasion. It's about mobilization. And they right now are very focused on mobilizing every individual they've got to get to the polls in 2020, and they're going to do it on a pretty radical agenda.
John Fredericks Radio Network with Steve Bannon. You got to go to webuildthewall.us. Check that out, webuildthewall.us. Now, Steve, the next time you guys go down there in August, I talked to Sheriff Clark on it. We talked about me going too, and you guys will figure out a way to do my show.
We're going to announce something big towards the end of July, August, and we want you to broadcast live from down there, John. I think it would give your listeners. People have got to get in tune with actually what is happening on the southern border. Every city in this country now is a border town. The drugs, the human trafficking, the desolation of these cartels are blowing through the border to bring to the United States. It is pretty devastating. Every town is a border town. And that's why people, I understand the base is sitting there. And I hear what they say every day. I follow it very closely. It's time to man up, right? Understand it's tough. That's why the base of the Trump, the Trump movement are patriots, right? Mm-hmm. Patriots don't sit there and whine. You don't suck your thumb. You don't curl up and get in the fetal position. I understand it's tough, okay? It was never going to be easy. Now you understand how not easy it is. It's time to really, everybody's got to put their shoulder to the wheel and get serious about this. And I got to tell you, this is going to be a huge monumental fight in 2020 about the southern border and about the sovereignty and security, not just of the United States, but remember, this wall, it's also for the protection of the people in northern Mexico. They're terrorized. Right now, particularly a little town like Juarez, which used to be a great border town, as they've been now terrorized and taken over by these drug cartels. Right. And this has been a you essentially have an area. Juarez is now one of the most dangerous cities in the world. I think that northern Mexico is every bit as dangerous as Afghanistan, and we just piled $62.5 billion last year into Afghanistan. It's time now to think about this war that we're at with these cartels on the southern border and what we're going to do about it.
Steve Bannon, former senior advisor, President Trump in the White House 2 years, and involved in just about everything that went on. Had that famous whiteboard I saw in his office one day. I went to Reince Priebus' office. I saw couches and chairs and nice pictures. I go into Bannon's office. There's this whiteboard, and it's like Trump's promises. And the first thing on there, build the wall. Of course, Paul Ryan was in charge, so he couldn't do crap. But he's joining us. Also, he engineered the Trump victory, and he used to be the chairman of Breitbart. And now he's head of this great C4 called Citizens for the American Republic. Follow him at Twitter, at CitizensAR, at CitizensAR. AR. Check them out. Also go to webuildthewall.us. They're doing great things there. I'm watching the Hong Kong protests yesterday. Something's going on here. Young people want to be free in Hong Kong. Yesterday, they stormed the General Assembly. They put graffiti on the walls. Tear gas is coming out. Is this the epicenter of something bigger to come, Steve Bannon?
Young people in the United States, if you look at the polling, wanting socialism and, following some of these socialist leaders. In Hong Kong, you have young people that are fighting for capitalism, taking to the streets, millions at a time. And yesterday, they basically forced the hand of the Chinese Communist Party and actually took over the Legislative Council building and saying that we're not going to have these extradition laws, we're not going to lose our sovereignty and rule of law. This is also principally driven, your audience should understand, that a large number of these young people are devout Christians and conservative Catholics. In fact, the music, the anthems they sing are old Christian hymns. And this is because of the suppression of not just the First Amendment, but what China has done to suppress religion inside mainland China. This is one of the most seminal events that's happening in the world today. There's two things that's happening on this Chinese situation. Number one is Huawei, and number two is what's happening in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, you're seeing a simultaneous revolution for capitalism, for freedom of religion, taking place by young people. The vast majority of these people are under 30 years old, and they're sitting there saying, we are not going to be ruled by this dictatorship. The world cut a deal in 1997. The British, the Americans, the world cut a deal that we were going to have our own rule of law for at least 50 years and have a system that had English common law as its basis. And we're not prepared to give that up. And they've been tear gassed. They've had rubber bullets shot at them. Today, the Chinese Communist Party came out and said, hey, we're not prepared to allow this thing to continue on like it is, that this is a direct challenge to our rule. So what's happening in Hong Kong, I think it's leading to potentially another Tiananmen Square situation as the weeks and months progress, because I don't see any back down in these people in Hong Kong. Folks should understand these protests have taken place over the last month are drawing 1 and 2 million people on the streets in a city that everybody understands is apolitical. They've never been very involved in politics. They're involved in making money. Okay, this is one of the financial capitals of the world. 1 and 2 million people, that would be the equivalent in the United States of 55, 60, 65 million people descending on Washington, D.C. This is a massive protest. And yesterday they took it to the next level. So the world should watch what's happening. I got to tell you, if the Chinese Communist Party, with the dissension, and this is what the mainstream media doesn't show, the Chinese Communist Party has a very, I think, tenuous hold on China. There's only 90 million communists and 1.4 billion people, and particularly in the southern provinces. There's a lot of current underneath the surface about freedom and independence. A lot of it driven not just about freedom of speech, but about freedom of religion, the suppression of of Dalai Lama and the Tibetan Buddhists, the suppression of the underground evangelical Christian church, the suppression with the Vatican of the underground Catholic Church, the treatment of the Uyghurs, of the Muslims in the West. Religion is very much on the mind of Chinese, just like in the Soviet Union, just like in Eastern Europe. Christianity and Catholicism flourished during the suppression of the Soviet Union. You've seen the exact thing happen in China. So the world should watch. If you want to see a fight for freedom, if you want to see young people who are sitting there going, hey, we see what socialism brings, we see what communism brings, we don't want any of it, and we're prepared to put our lives on the line to go against it. To me, it's incredibly inspirational, and it affects people's lives here in the United States, because to break the back of the Chinese Communist Party's economic war against the United States, really central to the deindustrialization of our country, is what's happening in Hong Kong today, coupled with this whole fight on Huawei that's about to become, I think, a major issue in the United States, as you can see from Osaka.
Do you think the president was wrong in giving a pass to Huawei in the short term?
I think what the president of the United States is showing is that he's prepared to show the capital. He's got three audiences, I think: the global capital markets, the global corporate interest, and the American people. And I think he's trying to show that he's prepared to make every effort possible to be reasonable, to come to a deal. This is not a trade deal. People have to get that out of their mind. This is an economic war that the Chinese Communist Party has been running against the United States of America for about 15 or 20 years. Donald Trump's the first president in this country's history, from Clinton to Bush to Obama, regardless of political party. The permanent political class has essentially financed and provided the technology to the Chinese Communist Party to build China into a beginning of a totalitarian state capitalist economic superpower, right, by deindustrializing our own country. Donald Trump's the first person to stand up and do that now. I think what he's trying to do is to show that he's prepared to make this process try to work to have a negotiations. I think it's going to be very tough to get a deal done. Senator Scott from Florida was on TV today on Squawk Box. I think people should go listen to that. He said he doesn't think there's going to be a deal. He doesn't think there's any way there can possibly be a deal. He's also absolutely adamantly opposed to any give up any easing of anything on Huawei. I think what the president's doing on Huawei, and I call Huawei is a dirty bomb inside the industrial democracies. This is a way to basically use data as the new plutonium against citizens and against nations. Huawei is the People's Liberation Army. That being said, I think on the component side, particularly since there's some supplier issues, the President Trump's eased up a little bit, and he's eased up specifically in areas where it's not about national security, or so they're putting forward. I think we got to give President Trump some accommodation on this as they try to get these negotiations back on track. But I can tell you, I don't think on Capitol Hill, and I don't think in the national security community, and particularly I don't think now among our Western allies who are waking up to this, that there's going to be any real easement on Huawei. Huawei is essentially the Chinese Communist Party's, the People Liberation's Army's technology branch, and what they're trying to do is dominate 5G. If they do that, it's game, set, match for that. They will dominate the future of all technology.
What you just said, I agree with 100% because I don't think there is going to be a deal because what are the Chinese going to agree to, right? It's just going to be more stalls and lies that they've been doing for 50 years. And if you're the Chinese communists, you're just waiting out this election, right? Because you know if you get a Democrat in there, they're going to play ball with you and they're going to go back to the way it was, which the Chinese keep ripping us off so some farmer in Iowa can sell soybeans or whatever it is that Wall Street can make more money and the banksters up there get a bigger bonus by continuing to screw us and outsource labor. So if you're the president, you know the Chinese aren't going to come to the table with anything meaningful but talk. Right? Meantime, he suspended the second round of tariffs indefinitely, but does that also mean he suspended getting rid of the first round of tariffs? So
no, I think it's critical. This is, I think, where they look. The Chinese want those first round of tariffs off. Remember, President Trump's got those first round of tariffs at 25%. That is, and this is where I think that people are not seeing how historic this is. This is something that wouldn't even be discussed under previous administrations. It would have been apostasy. Right? The apostasy would not even be discussed. President Trump has got some pretty tough tariffs already in there to try to bring the Chinese to the table. Remember, his entire deal is about transparency, accountability, and enforceability, okay, to make sure that they actually make a deal dealing with the restructuring of their state capitalism to stop being at war with the West. That has fundamental change in it. That's why they tore the deal up at the last second and walked away after negotiating for 9 months. He's very focused on fundamental, deep change. This is just not about buying additional agricultural product. It's not. This is much deeper than that. And that's why I think President Trump's trying to now, he has delayed or suspended the second round of tariffs to focus on getting back to the table and seeing and showing the world if the Chinese Communist Party can actually deal with the West in an even-handed manner. Remember, they have lied to us consistently. They were in the Rose Garden in 2015 with President Obama, where President Xi signed a document that said they were going to have no more cyber intrusions into American and Western businesses. And they completely, shortly thereafter started to dramatically increase their intrusions into Western businesses. So the Chinese Communist Party cannot be trusted. You have to have mechanisms in there to be able to monitor it, and you have to have mechanisms, and that's why they walked away. They actually saw what President Trump was demanding in this first round. They walked away. That's why I think any deal is going to be very, very, very difficult. But I got news for them: the Democratic Party, and particularly some members on Capitol Hill, are getting as tough as President Trump is. I think on the count, they clearly intend they want somebody else rather than Trump. They'd rather deal with a Democrat, but I think that they have misread this situation. In that I think the entire country, particularly Democrats, to win those states of Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Iowa, are going to have to really get as tough on the manufacturing part of this with the Chinese Communist Party as President Trump is, at least as tough as President Trump is. So I think the Chinese they're dramatically misreading the American people. I think they feel that Wall Street and corporate America speaks for the American people, and that's what's led us down this road. The political class, Wall Street, and corporate America have led us to this position after 20 years. The Chinese Communist Party thinks that speaks for America. I think they've misread this. I think working class people and middle class people now understand the economic threat of the Chinese Communist Party, and it's not just about removing Donald Trump, which they're very focused on. I think they want another president rather than Donald Trump.
All right, so Steve, just to recap here, what you're saying is the Chinese are still banking on Wall Street and the globalists, Lower Manhattan, Goldman Sachs, your former company, by the way, calling the shots, and they'll get their way like they always have for 50 years. That's number one. Second thing is they're figuring, look, well, 50-50 chance Trump doesn't get reelected in 2020. We'll just stall, wait it out, not put the new tariffs on, get a new president, we'll be back to usual. You're saying both of those no longer exist in their model.
Well, I think, number one, I don't think President Trump waits. If they continue to rope-a-dope, if they don't come to the table and I think have meaningful discussions and really get back to that original document, Bob Lighthizer, Ambassador Lighthizer, is the U.S. trade rep. He's taken the lead in crafting this deal. I think it was 175 pages long. I don't see President Trump wavering much from what's in that deal for what he's demanding. And I think that there's some period of time, and this is, Wall Street is high-fiving today because they think this thing's back on track. I think unless there's real movement towards a deal, and a deal that President Trump feels, accommodates what he believes is necessary to kind of restructure their economy to make it more in line with the West, I believe that he will put on this $325 billion of additional tariffs. I don't think that that's put off indefinitely. So I think that is out there. But I think this goes well into 2020. I don't see how the complexity of this, that you can bring it forward any quicker than that.
Steve, you've worked in the White House with both Ambassador Bob Lighthizer, our chief negotiator, and with Peter Navarro, special trade advisor to the president. What is your level of confidence in both of these executives?
Oh, the country. I mean, every night you should say a prayer for those two individuals and others that work with them. But Peter Navarro and Bob Lighthizer have had that, not just the president's back. They understand, I think, what the president's trying to accomplish. Lighthizer's deal is and this was negotiated over 9 months. The Chinese tore it up at the last second when they fully realized what they were agreeing to, right? Or at least certain aspects, certain members of the Chinese Communist Party realized what they were agreeing to. Lighthizer is a senior partner at Cravath. He's one of the smartest lawyers in the country. He's one of the best trade lawyer we've ever had. Peter Navarro is actually the first, economist. He's Harvard trained. People never talk about that, about Navarro. He's a Harvard PhD. He's brilliant in his analysis of the Chinese economy and its effect on industrial America, on the manufacturing aspect of America. That's what the Chinese have a very focused strategy between One Belt, One Road, Made in China 2025, and Huawei's 5G rollout. Those three aspects are to become the dominant advanced manufacturing power of the 21st century and turn the United States and America into a tributary state. We would be Jamestown to their Great Britain. We're almost there today. That's why it's so tough to close the trade balance. We sell them agriculture products, natural resources, natural gas, timber. We sell very few finished products to them, and that's why it's so difficult to close the trade gap with them. So these people understand it. They work with President Trump every day. It was, I think, noticeable that Peter Navarro was on the plane in Osaka to assist President Trump. But no, those two are not they're the anti-Wall Street faction. And look, to be brutally frank, Wall Street and corporate America got us in this jam. They're the ones that deindustrialized this country. And it's the working class people, and the Trump movement is essentially forcing it to take it back. And that's what Elizabeth Warren, you read her economic patriotism white paper, it's essentially taking many of the themes of President Trump and saying, hey, we have to do this. I think working class and middle class people across the country of both political parties are now awakened fully to the threat that China poses, not just to the United States, but to the world.
Going forward, the $500 billion trade deficit we have, our cash going to them one way that we can't close, and this is why we hold all the cards. But one of the reasons you just said is, they buy our raw materials, we buy their finished product. That's why you can never close the gap, right?
That's what the key. Remember, the key to the Trump deal is to bring the supply chain back to the industrial democracies, to bring the supply chain, particularly the high value-added manufacturing supply chain, back to the United States of America. This is not going to happen overnight. But for 20 or 25 years, ever since the late 90s when we allowed them to join the World Trade Organization, we've essentially shipped the manufacturing base to China. It's not going to come back in a week. That's why you're seeing these the numbers from the last quarter. That 1% growth that got us to the 3.2% was about the changing of the trade imbalance. This is going to take time, but at least Trump's started the process. And you hear the cheerleaders on Wall Street and all the fear factor they put in there, and all the things they say about CNN every day, banging on Trump about the farmers. The farmers, listen, President Trump has put in tremendous amount of subsidy issues in the farm issue, and the farm issue is a $20 billion issue at the end of the day. I think the max that we shipped to them is $20 billion. And so it's manageable, and it has to be managed. The farmers have to be assisted in this. They can't bear the brunt of this. That being said, it's incumbent upon us to get the manufacturing base. We just had an all-day seminar conference in Chicago, right outside of Chicago 2 weeks ago, by the Republican Hindu Coalition of Hindu entrepreneurs that have been dominant in the printed circuit board business that essentially been gutted over 20 years by the Chinese, with the support of the permanent political class to let those businesses, and these were tens of thousands of high value-added manufacturing jobs. And this industry was gutted because of the permanent political class looked the other way, and Wall Street, with the Chinese Communist Party, shipped the jobs to China. Now, this is not about the Chinese people. The Chinese people are as decent and hardworking as possible. This is about a totalitarian surveillance dictatorship out of Beijing that is running things, and those guys have to be confronted. They're being confronted by young Christians, capitalists, on the streets of Hong Kong, and they're being confronted on Capitol Hill by people like Bob Lighthizer and Peter Navarro and President Trump.
Steve, we're out of time. I think this might be the best interview ever. Great, fascinating analysis of our situation as it ties into Hong Kong, China, the supply chain, and this what you called economic war, that this is not a trade war, ladies and gentlemen. Steve Bannon is saying that this is an economic war that the Chinese government has levied against the U.S. unbelievably successfully. I mean, at some point in the annals of history, the last 30 years is going to be written as a tremendous victory for the Chinese up to Trump, and we'll see what happens after this. Steve Bannon, any final words?
No, I think, look, for your audience, which I know are very tuned to what's going on, I think now's the time to really pay attention. There's so many important, we're at an inflection point, I think, in world history. This great confrontation of the Chinese Communist Party and really what they represent, which is a totalitarian state versus freedom. What's happening in Hong Kong today is what happened in 1773 in Boston, right? That is what's so important, that freedom, particularly these people have been suppressed. They've had freedom for a while, now they've been suppressed, and they're saying, we're not going to tolerate this. We would rather lay down our lives, we would rather put ourselves in the middle of tear gas and rubber bullets, and you've seen the way that the Hong Kong riot police are handling these kids, that we would rather take it on. So these issues on the southern border, the issues in Hong Kong, what's happening in these trade negotiations, it's not time now to sit down with your video games or punch out and just watch cable TV all day long. You've got to get engaged. You can't put the entire burden on one person. President Trump's got big shoulders, but everybody has got to heave to here. You've got to put your own shoulder to the wheel. If you want to do this, and here's the thing, stop whining and start doing that. So I think we've got a great opportunity to continue to turn this country around and to return it to the great country it was. But it's going to take a lot of work, and the people that are going to do it, John, are the people that listen to your radio show.
Thank you, Steve Bannon. Thank you for being with us. You can follow Steve's organization,
Thanks.
C4, Citizens for the American Republic, at Citizens AR. Steve, thanks for being with us. Thank you for your time.